Thanks for staying with us. You're watching What Now? Let's turn attention to France, where the political crisis deepens, but a surprise concession from Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu may have just saved his government. President Emmanuel Macron has unveiled a new cabinet after days of backroom talks, even as protests and party rebellions mount over France's austerity budget and pension reforms. After marathon negotiations, Macron reappointed Sébastien Lecornu as Prime Minister, and that's just 4 days after he resigned to steer a new government through one of the toughest budget battles in years. The reshuffled team keeps Jean-Noël Barrot as Foreign Minister and Gérald Darmanin as Justice, while former Labour Minister Catherine Vautry now takes over the defense portfolio. But there are new faces too. Paris Police Chief Laurent Nunez becomes Interior Minister, and environmentalist Monique Babot takes charge of the green transition. The shake-up comes as France faces rising debt, EU pressure to rein in spending, and mounting anger over austerity cuts and Macron's controversial 2023 pension reform that raised the retirement age from 62 to 64. Sébastien Lecornu promised on Tuesday to suspend a landmark pension reform until after the 2027 election, sacrificing one of President Emmanuel Macron's legacy achievements to ensure the government's survival. The announcement stunned lawmakers and diffused a looming no-confidence vote. Leftist parties who had threatened to join the far right to topple Lecornu called it a victory, saying they would now allow his budget to proceed, at least for now. Lecornu's move could cost France over 2 billion euros by 2027, but the Prime Minister insists the losses will be offset by new savings. Macron is facing his worst domestic crisis since taking office in 2027 and has yet to address the nation. Well, let's discuss this further as we bring in an international affairs analyst, Joshua Onyewe. He joins me virtually. Good to have you join us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we're seeing the suspension of pension reforms, which is one of the major economic legacies of the Macron administration, and that came as a shock even to lawmakers. And then we're also seeing an alliance, of the Macron government with a socialist group in parliament. It will look like President Macron's government has now been backed into a corner, hasn't it?
Yes, certainly. But permit me to give a context to these issues that is happening currently in France. So to fully understand what is happening in France right now, we need to start with how their government actually works. So France has what is called a semi-presidential system. Unlike countries like UK, where the prime minister holds power, or the US, where the president holds, runs the show, France is split between two leaders. A president who handles foreign policy and a prime minister who manages day-to-day governing and needs, support from the parliament. Now, this system was designed back then to give France, strong leadership. But today it is falling apart, and it is causing a mess. So to really answer your question, France spends about 14% of its GDP on public pension, and compared to the United States, where they spend about 7%. And to put this in perspective, the European Union average is around 11%, and even Japan with one of the world's oldest populations spends about 10% on GDP on public pension. So France is an outlier, even among its European neighbors. In fact, the French retirees claim up to 50% of their annual average earnings based on the highest earnings in the past years. So they could retire at 62 for sure, and part of what was part of the reform, which is now put on hold. What is really going on now is that the country is spending more on pensions. The prime minister wants to bring that down, but when you have a divided parliament, this becomes really a big mess for any prime minister of France to control the system. It's really, really messy. Prime ministers have turned to a controversial constitutional tool which they call Article 49.3. This provision lets the government pass legislation without parliamentary vote, but with a catch. The moment you trigger the Article 49.3 to bypass the parliament, automatically this triggers the opposition parties to file for no confidence. And this has been the case where previous prime ministers have used this Article 49.3 to bypass the parliament so that they could pass this budget, particularly in this case now for Lekunu, the budget for 2026. I just want to quickly comment, apologies because of time, because you've raised very critical issues. Again, countries who run that joint system of president and prime minister seems to have political instability most of the times, and that's a different conversation. But let's talk about the economy of France. 100% debt ratio to over 100% debt ratio to GDP, and then the new ratings is expected by a ratings company anytime soon. But do you get a sense that this new suspension of the pension reforms gives any sort of economic stability, maybe even political stability in France? Not at all. Not at all. If you consider the context where France has the highest retirees pension, who gets the most money amongst the EU countries. So when you consider this fact, it's difficult to pass a law within the parliament, where you also have the baby boomers themselves making the law. So the moment any prime minister introduces this law, including what Lekunu is facing, the moment you introduce a law that seems to cut down on these pensions, you get a fight back from the parliaments, because they represent their people. So France needs to cut over 30 billion from next year's budget to bring the deficit down to 4.7% of the GDP. Now, France has the third largest debt to GDP ratio in European Union, behind only Greece and Italy. And Brussels has been asking Paris to put their finances in order. But it's really a struggle between pleasing the people and pleasing, working to fix the economy. So the biggest problem now is that you have Macron, a globalist Macron, who is pushing for war in Ukraine, and supporting the war in Ukraine, and also the European Union that is also, facilitating or more or less, stoking the flame by, warmongering for Ukraine. And on the local side, the French people can see this. Okay, so you want to cut down budget, however, you still want to spend money on war. So this dilemma is what is really pushing the people to say, no, we are not going to take it. And the moment any prime minister, think about it, 4 prime ministers in just 4 years. Macron has had 7 prime ministers. So it doesn't matter what they try to do, as long as they are pushing for war, the globalist Macron, and it's impossible to convince the people that we want to cut down your pension funds, especially increase the retirement age. So these are the big issues currently, troubling France.
Just a lot of issues to talk about, but we're out of time. We hope that France will not be needing a bailout like we saw in Greece and Italy. And then this also means a lot for the Marine Le Pen party, the far-right party. And I'm sure they're watching this with excitement ahead of 2027. Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure to have you on, International Affairs Analyst Joshua Onyenwere.
Thank you very much for